Hey, greetings everybody. It's Gleekon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we started the fourth part of Dawn of the Aspects, the five-part series, about the proto-dragons that will eventually become the five aspects. And they finally joined battle, although it wasn't the dragon aspects or whatever, their primitive forms. It wasn't their idea, but they kind of got dragged into it, and they don't want all the other proto dragons to die, so they're trying to fight Galakrond, but it seems like something is bad about to go down. So here we go, chapter 2, and it's appropriately titled Doom. Stay a while and listen to this bad boy, and let's see how much doom is in store for our characters and everyone around them. Jaina sensed someone seeking her the moment she returned to her sanctum. Unfortunately, that someone was none other than the Archmage Modera. Modera was one of those Jaina most respected and admired among the Magi. She had become a member of the Council of Six long before Jaina, during the Second War in fact, and many were the times the younger Archmage had turned to Modera for guidance in one subject or another. Yeah, and I don't even know that she joined it then. She may have. That was the first mention of her being in it, but we really didn't have much mention of the Council of the Six before that. That was when she first appeared in the lore. Instead, Jaina now concentrated on cloaking herself with a spell she hoped would keep her from even Modera's notice. Archmage, the other woman called from outside. That Modera had come in person meant that she had already attempted to locate Jaina by magical means and had not been pleased by her failure. Jaina had not given any official notice of her need to depart the city, and as leader, she should have at least informed the rest of the Council of Six. Modera was rightly interested in finding her, but even that did not dissuade Jaina from keeping herself hidden, if possible. Archmage, Modera repeated more firmly. Forgive me. Are you within? It could not be as simple as the elder woman giving up when she did not receive an answer, Jaina noted. For only a breath later, she felt the casting of a subtle spell outside the door. Jaina, planted against one wall just beyond the entrance, watched as a transparent form materialized near her. Jaina, the figure coalesced into the image of Modera. Although much older chronologically than Dalaran's leader, she still appeared as a handsome woman with snowy white hair bound in a braid. The image peered around, obviously seeking the sanctum's owner. Forgive this intrusion. I really must speak with you. It said something about the urgency of whatever situation concerned Modera, that she would enter Jaina's chambers uninvited, even through illusion. Jaina found no fault with the action, although she did vow that if things normalized, she would strengthen her wards. Clearly, Modera was more powerful than even Jaina had taken her for. The other Archmage frowned. She already faced slightly toward where Jaina stood, but suddenly looked directly at the blonde woman. Just as Jaina was certain that Modera had sensed her, the elder spellcaster turned her head to the opposing wall, eyeing it much the way she had done where Dalaran's leader hid. Where is she? Modera murmured, looking more pensive. Where could she have gone at a time like this? The last question almost made Jaina reveal herself, but then Kalek's exhausted face formed again in her thoughts. Jaina's resolve strengthened, even though a part of her knew that she was choosing emotion over sense. Modera's ghostly image looked over her shoulder as if listening to some other specter yet unseen. Very well, the older Archmage muttered to the air. I will see you shortly. We will have to consider a different course of action. Turning back to the seemingly empty chamber, Modera raised one hand and began writing in the air. Runes flared before her. Please see me the moment you return. It is urgent. Modera left the words floating in the chamber. She looked around one last time, her eyes only briefly passing over Jaina, then simply dissipated. Jaina waited a moment longer until all trace of Modera's presence had faded into the distance. The younger Archmage exhaled as she reappeared. She stared at the floating message, swearing to find out what Modera wanted as soon as she had assured herself of Kalek's survival. Returning to her collection, Jaina sought out the tome she needed. That proved more troublesome than the spellcaster had thought. The volume Jaina expected to hold the answers was apparently the wrong one, even though she was certain of her memory. The Archmage set the book aside, then thumbed through. Another that she recalled had some associated information. But yet again her memory contradicted what she discovered in the book. She set the second volume down, then eyed the two tomes lying side by side. Holding a hand over each book, Jaina concentrated. A white glow surrounded both hands and spread to the two volumes. The glow was met by a lavender haze surrounding each book. Jaina gasped. She could not say how she knew, but she could tell that what enveloped the tomes was some very old, subtle spell. It was meant to keep something hidden, presumably the very information the Archmage sought. However, Jaina also sensed a fraying in the spell, as if after so much time the original intent of the casting had begun to be lost. The original intent was lost. Jaina could not help but think that this was also the key to what was happening to Kalak. The artifact had been created with some purpose in mind, but she wondered if the exact focus of that purpose had faded with the fraying. It also interested her that these books, clearly written long after the artifact's creation, should react to her so precisely. Somehow the ancient magic had detected her intentions, which meant spellwork of the highest skill. But who would have not only the ability but also the cunning to track down these tomes, and over such a span of time? Jaina knew that there were, of course, mundane possibilities, such as the High Elves, but for some reason, the spellwork did not feel like their work. In fact, it had a feel to it much older than even that venerable race. Her brow wrinkled. She withdrew her hands from the two volumes. Their glow instantly vanished. The Archmage eyed her collection, then hesitantly cast a more generalized version of her spell over the rows of tomes and scrolls. Not entirely to her surprise, every piece in her collection glowed lavender. Jaina immediately delved deeper into the spell work. As she had begun to suspect, the casting included what she thought of as an infection subspell. If there was an object of similar tendencies nearby, in this case a book of magic next to another book of magic, the original spell would spread to that other object. To do it so thoroughly, so successfully, was yet again a sign of how adept the caster had been. Dismissing her own work, Jaina carefully thumbed through one of the two books. With her expert memory, the Archmage verified that everything she expected to find remained where it should have been. As best as she could establish, the spell had changed nothing else. Only what Jaina sought appeared to be affected. The Archmage was not daunted. She had confronted complicated and confounding puzzles of a magical nature before and solved them. She would let no spell defeat her. More to the point, Kalak was at stake. To Jaina, nothing else mattered. Galakrond remained under heavy assault. A female of Malagos' family exhaled on one of the extra hind limbs, then tore off the frozen appendage before it could warm up again. Another female of a silver hue unleashed a shower of what appeared to Kalak to be a steaming liquid metal. The blue column seared Galakrond's thick hide, leaving a festering streak twice as wide as the proto-dragon who had breathed it. Two males, a deep green in color, used their larger-than-average hind paws to rake the base of the Leviathan's neck. "It is nothing," Malagos growled. "It is all nothing." "The eyes," Neltharion suggested. "Strike when they follow away. Blind Galakrond, eye after eye." Nosdormu snorted. "If this many eyes," he responded, holding up one of his tiny forepaws. "We attack for more days than we have." The Brown had a very good if demoralizing point. With so many extra eyes, even if the trio managed to persuade the other attacking proto-dragons to follow through on such a plan, the time needed was surely far more than Galakrond intended to give them. "Must warn Talanixa." Even as Malagos said it, his certainty concerning the futility of trying once more to make the imposing female see sense touched Kalak. Yet Malagos saw no other chance but to try. Next to him, Nosdormu let loose a low warning hiss. The many eyes had suddenly narrowed. Despite being aware of what that might presage, Malagos nevertheless started for Talanixa. He did not get far. Galakrond unleashed a roar that silenced all other proto-dragons and made the sky shake. Several attackers near the gargantuan fiend tumbled uncontrollably from his vicinity. Galakrond exhaled, and the air everywhere filled with a foul mist that reminded the oncoming Malagos much too much of that breathed by the not-living. Kalak's host recoiled as the mist rushed toward him. His wings beat hard as he fought to reverse direction before it was too late. But the mist still caught Malagos. The proto-dragon and his unseen companion awaited the agony that would surely accompany the rotting of Malagos' living flesh. Instead, a powerful lethargy overtook the icy blue male. It touched so deep that even Kalak's thoughts were muddied. To Calic, it was as if his very life was slowly seeping from him, and he vaguely noticed that Malygos felt the same. Yet some part of the young proto-dragon continued to urge his wings to flap. Malygos exited the mist. The moment he did, both his mind and Calyx began to clear, and strength started to return. The feeling of utter listlessness dwindled. Slow death, Malygos pondered as he tried to comprehend in simpler terms what Calyx recognized in more sophisticated ones. He breathes slow death. His thoughts finally clear enough, Malygos surveyed the horror unfolding before him. A great portion of Talonyxa's grand charge had been caught within the massive cloud exhaled by Galakrond. The behemoth's countless eyes had been watching for one thing, the very moment when most of Galakrond's foes would be within range of this new and horrific breath weapon. Some of the stricken proto-dragons tried to turn and flee, while others simply fought to stay aloft. A few could not summon the will to keep their wings flapping, and plunged to their doom. But even in the midst of the cloying mist, some proto-dragons still managed more control. Chief among them was Talonyxa, who appeared to Malygos to be suffering a different malady, the utter madness Calic and his host had noted earlier. Talonyxa roared over and over, perhaps in part, both Malygos and Calic believed, to keep herself from falling prey to the mist. She moved not away from Galakrond, but closer to him, challenging him as if the two were the same size and strength. Galakrond laughed, the sound deafening. With a single beat of his wings, he cut the distance between them. Talonyxa opened her mouth wide, but this time not a roar but a bolt of lightning issued forth. It struck Galakrond directly on the snout, and had as much effect of slowing or injuring him as a pebble might have. Now it was the misshapen proto-dragon who opened his maw wide, a maw so great that the mighty Talonyxa was but a fly in comparison. The jaws closed upon the female even as she spun about in a futile attempt to escape. The huge, sharp teeth caught Talonyxa between them. Galakrond made no attempt to correct his bite. Rather, he shook his head back and forth, violently shaking his prey. Talonyxa snapped in vain at the teeth and managed one more bolt, but to no avail. Her head quickly dropped and her wings ceased beating. She still lived, but barely. There was no help from those she had once led. The other proto-dragons could hardly keep in the air or protect themselves, much less come to her aid. Even had they wanted to, Calic and his host knew that it was already too late. Blood spilled over Talonyxa and her breathing came in gasps. Galakrond ceased shaking her. With barely any effort, he clamped down and bit Talonyxa in half. The still twitching upper torso tumbled out of sight, a shower of blood and other life fluids in its wake. With mock disdain, Galakrond unclenched his jaws just enough to let the rest of Talonyxa fall free. He laughed then, and with a powerful beat of his wings, moved among the lethargic proto-dragons. Mouth opening much wider, Galakrond began to feed. His first victims scarcely seemed to notice their demise, so quickly did the horrific Leviathan swallow them up. 5 vanished in the space of a single breath. Galakrond barely paused, turning to take in 3 more a moment later. "What can we do?" Neltharion growled in frustration. He looked nearly ready to try to defy the mist, despite the obvious result of doing so. Malygos could not blame him for his rising exasperation. Wholesale death played out before them, and none of the 3 could offer any way to put an end to it, not at least without likely committing suicide in the process. Yet Calic, feeling his host's raging emotions and thoughts, knew that Malygos would have willingly sacrificed himself if it meant stopping the slaughter. Then Malygos noticed something about the mist. He started forward. "Come!" He said much to Calic that the other two males obeyed. Malygos headed toward the mist, then abruptly rose. A faint cloying scent infiltrated his nostrils, immediately causing a slight slowing of his thoughts. The icy blue male took an almost vertical shift in direction, rising several yards before daring to take even the briefest breath. When he did breathe, Malygos found no trace of the scent that pervaded Galakrond's evil fog. Adjusting to a more horizontal path of flight, Calic's host found the lack of scent continued. He now flew above the mist and its effects. The other 2 males flanked him as he soared toward Galakrond. Intent on his feeding, the gargantuan proto-dragon failed to notice the tiny trio above. Dang it. Too fast. Even had he done so, it was doubtful that Galakrond would have seen him as anything but amusing. After all, what could 3 do that hundreds could not? That was a question for which Malygos did not yet have an answer. Even as the three reached the spot almost directly above the monster, he peered down at the terrifying tableau. There it is again, watching as 4 more proto-dragons disappeared down Galakrond's gullet. "Mist dwindling above," Nosdormu offered. "Too slow below, though." "Little wind," Galakrond added, sniffing the air. "Not enough." Malygos continued to study Galakrond. The only real wind was that caused by the enormous wings. They were beginning to scatter the mist, but not soon enough to save the others. A curious thought stirred in Malygos' mind, one that caught Kalak by surprise. Malygos imagined himself when he hunted over the water and would dive with great velocity so as to strike deeper and seize the better prey lurking further below. His eyes narrowed as he focused on Galakrond's head. "The head," he muttered to his companions. "Breathe little, strike hard." Understanding dawned. Neltharion grinned and Nosdormu nodded. Satisfied they knew what they had to do, and they also knew they might very well die in the attempt. Malygos arced down. As he descended, he beat his wings as hard as he could, pushing his velocity to its utmost. Below, Galakrond's head appeared, not only to swell in size, but also to rush up to meet him. Kalak also understood his host's plan, but had doubts regarding its merits. Still, there was nothing he could do but watch as Malygos reached Galakrond. At the last moment, Malygos shifted so that his hind paws were underneath him. He pulled himself into a ball as much as possible, even folding his wings tight behind him. Out of the corner of his eye, Malygos saw Neltharion do the same. In rapid succession, the 3 proto-dragons struck Galakrond hard on the head. Malygos dared not hope to cause much, if any, damage to his target. There was only a very minor chance of that. What Kalak's host did seek was exactly what he got. He made Galakrond very angry. The 3 proto-dragons striking so hard did induce some pain. Their velocity was also enough to shove Galakrond's head down so that he missed swallowing 2 more victims. The shock of nearly being devoured finally stirred the pair to some effort of escape. It was Neltharion who proved most decisive in causing Galakrond momentary distress. When his hind paws struck, they did so with a force only one of his family could create. Seismic waves shook the hard head, briefly making the behemoth disoriented, an added respite that Malygos could not have dreamed of gaining. But Galakrond recovered too soon. No longer even caring about the pair slowly fleeing from him, he looked up. His wings beat wildly as his fury at actually being assaulted overtook him. And as Malygos had hoped, the gigantic proto-dragon's wings did what the weak wind could not. The mist that Galakrond had breathed dissipated rapidly around him. Proto-dragons began to flee in earnest. Galakrond did not at first notice that his prey had scattered. So outraged was he at the small foes above him. "Little bugs," he rumbled, each word all but deafening the trio. "A meager meal you are, but a meal you are." To the surprise of not only Galakrond, but also Malygos and Nosdormu, Neltharion plunged toward the misshapen creature. While Galakrond sneered at his puny challenger, Neltharion changed direction, and instead of Galakrond's snout, attacked the huge proto-dragon's left eye. In few other areas could the impetuous Neltharion have caused any actual harm. Even his previous strike had only irritated Galakrond, yet now, opening his mouth wide, the charcoal-gray male erupted with a cry of sheer force. Galakrond whirred in what was no doubt the first true pain he had felt in some time. He shut the eye hit by Neltharion's strike, and then when that proved insufficient to put an end to his agony, he shut the other, too. "Fly! Fly!" Malygos shouted to anyone who could hear, including Neltharion. "But we have him," his friend insisted. "We do!" Galakrond opened his eyes. The left one was as red as blood, but he could still see as well as the other, and both glared at Neltharion with a rage such as Malygos and Kalak had not seen directed at even the icy blue male. Great jaws snapped at Neltharion, who barely evaded them. Nosdormu and Malygos came to the aid of their companion, aiming for the sensitive eyes. Galakrond instinctively looked down, making both of their attacks instead hit his thick, armored brow ridge. But Malygos had not expected anything more than those results, and knew that Nosdormu had thought the same. Once again, Galakrond had been distracted, this time saving not only Neltharion, but also Malygos and Nosdormu. With Malygos in the lead, the three took to the higher sky and vanished into the cloud cover. It did not take Galakrond's fearsome roar to inform them that he pursued. The three glanced at one another, then split up. Malygos pushed as high as he could. The thinner air made flying more difficult, but he hoped that would... Oh, ow! Got me. The thinner air made flying more difficult, but he hoped that would also make it troublesome for Galakrond to follow. The icy blue male believed that his friends would do as he did. At the very least, the risk they took aided the survivors of Talonyx's ill-fated plan. Silence reigned. Struggling to maintain his position, Malygos looked over the clouds. There was no sign of any other proto-dragon alive or not. After all Malygos had been through already, the effort to stay aloft grew too taxing to bear. Listening carefully, Calic's host still heard nothing. He began to wonder if Galakrond had moved on. It mattered not. Malygos finally had to descend. He planned to drop only as far as he needed to in order to breathe properly. From there, he would have to judge whether it was safe to continue on. His heart pounded, both from the struggle for air and from the tension of keeping an eye and nose out for Galakrond. Calic, experiencing the same, at times forgot that he was but a passenger. He tried to steer toward the east, only to be reminded that this was not his body when Malygos turned south instead, then dived a little farther. The proto-dragon left the cloud cover. The area was empty. The rest of Talonyx's followers had wisely fled as fast as they could. But where, Malygos and Calic wondered, were Neltharion and Nosdormu? Where, indeed, was Galakrond? Something suddenly collided with Malygos from behind. The impact sent both him and the object hurtling toward the ground. He fought against the drop. Sorry, I lost my little... There we go.
No struggle. Galakrond close. No struggle.
Malygos ceased struggling. He let himself be guided to just above the ground and toward a set of low hills. Far above, Galakrond's roar reverberated. A few small caves appeared in the distance. Malygos' companion led him into one. They landed in semi-darkness. Calic's host turned to face his rescuer.
Alexstrasza.
The fire-orange female hissed quietly.
Galakrond hears well. Must speak softly.
Before he could answer, he heard movement coming from deeper in the cave. Malygos looked there, expecting Alexstrasza's sister to be joining them. Instead, the withered, decaying visage of an undead filled his view. That's not good, but I mean, if it's just one undead, they'll be okay. They're going to have to fight their way out. So that was kind of cool how we're seeing, like, the aspects are like the heroes. Almost the same way that our character in World of Warcraft is like a hero. They can just accomplish so much more than any individual. They're sort of like the first heroes of yore. Yeah, Talonyx is dead. We knew that was going to come. So now we have our second kind of mini antagonist that's gone. And we're left just with Galakrond and possibly some forces that may be behind Galakrond. Because I don't know that he got to this all on his own without any kind of influence, whether it's old gods or whatever. All right, cool. We got another episode in the pipe, 5x5. I look forward to seeing everybody next time on Lore of Warcraft.